Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. So for today's case, we have another solved case, which I know we've been doing a lot here on this channel, but that's just kind of how the cards have fallen with what everyone's been suggesting to me. But before we get into today's video, I just wanted to go ahead and say a big thank you to today's sponsor, Tommy John. Tommy John is a new sponsor to this channel, and I am just so excited to be working with them. Tommy John offers comfy, breathable, soft, and overall amazing quality underwear and lounge clothes. I received this super cute bra and underwear from Tommy John, and let me tell you, it is just so freaking comfortable. This is actually my new favorite bra, and that's saying something because I tend to get very attached to a certain bras and underwear. I don't know if you guys are like that, but I definitely am. It's just so uncomfortable when a certain bra doesn't fit right. So when I find one that fits me so perfectly, I just want to wear it every single day. And that's how it is with this new Tommy John bra that I just got. I'm wearing it right now, and I've been wearing it pretty much every day since I've gotten it. The bra and underwear are just so much more soft, comfortable, and less restrictive than any other underwear or bra I've tried. I love how seamless the bra looks while you're wearing it, while also providing the full amount of support that you need no matter how small or large your chest size may be. I also received a pajama set, and once again, it's just another win. They are just so comfortable and cute. It's such lightweight, soft, flowy material that's just so comfy to sleep in and lounge around in. I'm actually wearing the lounge pants right now because I like to be as comfortable as possible while I'm sitting here and recording. I've been wearing them for online classes and pretty much all day, every day that I'm home. It's kind of funny because my boyfriend actually got kind of jealous for how soft my PJs were, and now he wants to buy his own set, which is just crazy to me because he's definitely the type of guy who likes to wear just like a t-shirt or any random shorts to bed. But now he wants to buy one of these pajama sets for himself because they're just so darn comfortable. I love how convenient shopping with Tommy John is. Their website is so easy to navigate, and they deliver your comfies straight to your door. I'm definitely someone that likes to maximize my comfort throughout the day, whether I'm going to work or staying home all day. So not even having to leave my home to get my soft and comfy underwear and PJs is just so ideal to me. In addition to the sets that I've showed you, I love that they have so many more options for underwear and bras. They have boy shorts, high-rise briefs, normal briefs, cheeky briefs, thongs, and slip shorts. They have all sorts of different bras, including lightly lined semi-bras, scoop bralettes, triangle bralettes, and lightly lined wireless bras. They have packs of 3 or 6 or individual ones that you can select. Now, what I'm so excited about is if you go ahead and click the link in the description below and use code RachelShannon to get 15% off plus free shipping on your first pack of Tommy Johns. Trust me, these are just so comfy and soft and breathable, especially with so many of us working from home or doing school from home like I am. It's never been a better time to invest in the most comfortable underwear and loungewear imaginable. Thank you again to Tommy John for sponsoring today's video. Okay, so with that being said, let's just get into today's video. Now, I do want to give a little bit of a warning before the video that there are a lot of details that are very, very uncomfortable and disturbing to listen to. It also does involve sexual assault and things like that, so if that is something that you are very uncomfortable with, this may not be the video for you. Just wanted to put that out there for all of you guys because I know that as I was researching this case, I really started to get emotional and it just hit home for me, and this case just made me very uncomfortable to research, but I do think that this case is such an important one to talk about and there are lessons that we can learn from it. So with that, let's just get into the case. Today we are going to be discussing the murder of Tess Richey. Tess Richey was born November 30th, 1994 in North Bay, Ontario in Canada to her mother, Christine Hemerston, and I could not find the name of her father. Tess was the baby of the family, being the youngest of 5 girls, Verena, Jenna, Rachel, and Haley. Her family was described as being very close-knit, and even when they all weren't living at the family home anymore, they would stay in contact with each other every single day. She was very close with her sisters, with her sister Rachel describing her as her best friend and soulmate. According to Rachel, Tess was absolutely spoiled rotten, but despite this, she was an incredibly hard worker. Her family described her as being a funny, clever, and witty girl. She was sweet, caring, and giving, and she was never afraid to stand up for literally anybody who needed protection. She absolutely loved animals. She was a vegan and a member of PETA and went out of her way to show that she stood up for animal rights. She was an avid runner, participating in several marathons. She loved photography and doing her makeup, and she was into fashion and also loved going thrift store shopping. Now, growing up, Tess attended the E.W. Norman Public School, then went on to the Whitfield Secondary School for high school. After graduating, she went on to work as an assistant manager at the Days Inn in North Bay before she moved to Ontario, Canada. There, she attended the George Brown College for Assaulted Women's and Children's Counseling and Advocacy, and then went off to the Seneca College and completed their flight services program, graduating in July of 2017. Once she graduated, she applied to work with different airlines to work as a flight attendant, and she also applied for a front desk position at a Toronto hotel. She hadn't heard back from either of the jobs that she applied for, so she was juggling 2 part-time jobs, with her main job being at a downtown coffee shop. Also, at this time, she was living in her own apartment filled with her collection of houseplants with her 2 dogs, Phil and Pearl. Either way, she had big aspirations to travel, and at the time of her murder, she was looking for an au pair position in Italy. To prepare for this, she downloaded the Rosetta Stone software so that she could jumpstart her education and start learning Italian before she moved out there. She was just ready to make something of herself and go out and see the world. Now, on Thursday, November 23rd, 2017, Tess had gotten back into contact with a high school friend, Riley Simmerd, after the two had not seen each other for about 2.5 years. The two decided to reconnect, so they made plans to hang out the following day. Then the next day, on Friday, November 24th, Tess was over at her sister Rachel's house in Midtown Toronto, just hanging out and having a great time together. They ate together, played a couple of games, and shared some great conversations. Then, at around 11:30 p.m., Tess headed out of her sister's house to go out for the night with her friend Riley. The two went to Cruise and Tango's, a drag bar nightclub on Church Street within the city's gay village that was a pretty popular place for many young people and students to go. The two had been drinking quite a bit, and at some point in the night, they were picked up on surveillance video at the club. According to Riley, after the two had drank quite a bit, they left the club at around 1:30 a.m., so Saturday in the early morning hours. Then, after leaving the club, the two friends met up with a man who was unknown at the time. The three were then seen on security cameras at around 3 a.m. near a hot dog cart at the intersection of Church Street and Wellesley Street East. By 3:30 a.m., the three were seen by a woman who only identified herself as Michelle, so we really don't know her true identity. Either way, Michelle said that the three were walking by her house near Church Street and Dundonald Street. She said that herself and a friend had just gotten home from work and they were all hanging out on her porch, having a smoke when they saw the group. According to Michelle, they were being a pretty loud and rambunctious group, but apparently Tess had noticed that the women were standing out there and that she noticed that she was being a disruption, so she apologized and was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I did not mean to disturb you." After this, the group introduced themselves to Michelle and they all struck up a conversation. The three introduced themselves to her, but Michelle could not remember what the man's name was. Michelle said that that night, Tess seemed to be pretty upset. She was telling her about how she had just had a breakup with her boyfriend and she was still feeling pretty down about it. Michelle and Tess actually ended up talking for 20 minutes, and they said that it was a really nice conversation despite their 20-year age gap. However, according to Michelle, throughout the entire interaction, the man that they were with was just kind of quiet. Michelle said, quote, "He was just quiet the whole time. He basically just blended in with the background. There's nothing about him that stood out, and that's why I didn't remember his name. He just became invisible." But nonetheless, she said that this man seemed polite and seemed to be like the guy next door. She actually thought that this man was good friends with Tess because whenever Tess would get upset during their conversations, he would kind of put his arm around her and comfort her. By 3:45 a.m. that morning, the group was getting ready to leave the house. As this happened, Riley was starting to receive messages from her boyfriend asking where she was and if she was going to be home soon. So Tess and Michelle said their goodbyes, and they exchanged phone numbers so that they could stay in touch, and then the three left. Tess and the unknown man headed west along Dundonald Street towards Young Street, while Riley walked south towards the College streetcar. Now, I don't know what kind of conversation Riley and Tess had exactly before going their separate ways, if any. Riley said that she doesn't even remember leaving Tess with this man that night, so honestly, they probably were very intoxicated, so if there was a conversation, who knows what was really said in that conversation. What we do know about the rest of that night comes from Tess's Fitbit and her phone. So Tess and her mother shared a Fitbit account. So at around 3 o'clock that same Saturday morning, her Fitbit pinged with an update on her step count, saying that she had taken 300 steps since 3 a.m. that morning. Then at around 4 a.m., Christine, Tess's mother, received several text messages to her phone from Uber. Tess's account for Uber had been set up with Tess's mother's information and her credit card. So this indicated that Tess had ordered a ride, but then it was canceled 15 minutes later. However, from these text messages, it could not be determined whether it was Tess that canceled this ride or if it was the driver. After this, Tess never made it home and would never be seen or heard from ever again. Now, by 8:45 a.m. on that Saturday, Rachel, Tess's sister, had started texting Tess and seeing where she was. Now, initially, when she didn't get a response, she didn't think that it was all that strange because she thought that maybe Tess had just been sleeping in after a long night out. She tried several more times throughout the day to get a hold of her, but she was not getting any response. Rachel was starting to get increasingly panicked at this point because Tess was usually really good about responding to text messages right away. It wasn't until around 6 or 7 p.m. that evening that Rachel realized that none of the messages that she was sending were even being delivered. So because of this, she tried calling, but all of her calls were going straight to voicemail. Immediately, this sent Rachel into a complete panic, so she started calling police and hospitals. Rachel thought that maybe Tess got arrested. Maybe she was thrown into the drunk tank to sober up for the rest of the day. She was running through every possibility in her head to make this make sense, but there was no thought in her head that something could be seriously wrong at this point. But by 9 p.m., Rachel headed over to Tess's apartment but found that she was not there. At this point, she called the Toronto police to report her sister missing. So then, the next day, on November 26th at around 3:45 p.m., two officers, Constable Alan McCullough and Michael Jones, received a call on their radios asking them to check an address related to Tess's disappearance. When they got there, they pretty much just glanced at the last known location that Tess was known to have been at, and then they just left. They did absolutely nothing to even put a single ounce of effort into actually walking around and looking for Tess. There were no search parties as far as I saw, and they just were not taking this initial call for her disappearance seriously at all. So because of the lack of police response, that Monday, November 27th, Christine and Tess's lifelong friend, Anne Brazeau, drove the 4 hours from North Bay to Toronto to search for Tess themselves. When they got there, they started searching the area and they put up numerous flyers and posters seeking information about Tess's disappearance. Then, by November 29th, the day before Tess's 23rd birthday, Christine and Anne returned back to church and Donald Street, where Tess was known to have last been seen. There was a house on the street that was all boarded up for construction, so they decided to go in and check it out. According to Christine, something just pulled her to this construction site. They started opening up trash cans and searching around, and to Christine's absolute shock and horror, they found her daughter's body dead in the stairwell of that house. She was wearing her black sweater, tights, and high-heeled boots. Her pink purse was sitting next to her along with her cell phone with its polka dot case. There was a small gash on her forehead, there were bruises on her wrists, arms, and hands, and her body was covered in dust from a nearby pile of gravel. Even though the only thing Christine wanted to do at that point was to go over to her daughter's body and hold her in her arms close and, just in case if she was just unconscious and not dead, but she knew that she should not go to her. She knew that she needed to stay away because she didn't want to contaminate the crime scene, which to me is just such amazing restraint. I don't know if I would be able to do the same in that situation. I know a lot of people wouldn't. So to me, that's just absolutely amazing. But she did end up doing the right thing. The thing that is the most disturbing about where she was found was that she was found literally 2 houses away from where she was known to have been last seen. So if police actually looked for her and took the time and effort to walk around to a couple different houses, they would have found her right away. But they were lazy and they didn't bother to search. So Christine had to go through the absolutely horrific trauma of finding her own daughter's dead body just thrown in a stairwell. So initially, when Tess's body was found, police said that there was no signs of trauma and that her death did not appear to be suspicious, so they did not think that foul play was involved. They labeled her death as a misadventure, saying that she was drunk and probably slipped and fell down the stairs and then died because it was cold, which doesn't even really make sense, because if she fell down the stairs, then there would be a lot of trauma on her, but I don't know, I digress. But by December 1st, Tess's autopsy was complete and it came out that Tess had actually died from neck compression or strangulation, and they ruled her death as a homicide. Now, from the very beginning, as we have seen, the media and police alike have handled her case so horrifically. Every media outlet was portraying Tess as an escort. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but there were literally articles whose titles would say, "Dead body comes back as belonging to murdered escort," which in and of itself is very problematic, acting as if her life means any less because of that. But even in Tess's case, it's literally not even true. There apparently was one anonymous source that said she worked secretly as an escort for many years. So it seems like media outlets just took that and absolutely ran with it. They said that she advertised her services on various adult websites and that she worked as a bartender at Brass Rail, which was a popular strip club in Toronto. But her sister Rachel said that she literally had zero reason to do that. She was spoiled rotten, like I said earlier. Christine came out and said that Tess was her favorite daughter and that all of the sisters were very well aware of that because she was their favorite too. Rachel said that if Tess asked them for money, she knew that any of them would hand it over whenever she needed it. Rachel said that she did use dating apps just like anybody else would, but she did not use them to advertise her services. She used them to date. She said that Tess did work as a bartender at a strip club, but that she didn't like it, so she quit after 2 weeks. To me, this just reads as her probably wanting to go out and try a new and interesting job that she could possibly make a lot of money off of from tips. So this definitely does not mean that she's an escort. Now, in another case that we'll be talking about either next week or the week after, the media pretty much does the exact same thing. All they want to do is make these cases seem more wild and interesting, and all they care about is the clicks that they'll get if they report this case as an escort to make it more spicy, rather than a normal 22-year-old girl who lost her life when she was simply hanging out with her friend. It's absolutely ridiculous, and to me, it could be a possible reason why police didn't want to go find her, because they thought maybe she was just an escort and that she was just out and, you know, she'd come back eventually and her life doesn't matter as much because she's probably just out with some strange man. But either way, when her autopsy came back and it did confirm that she was in fact murdered, Tess's case was handed over to the homicide unit. This was such a good thing for her case because this unit actually did a very diligent job of investigating her murder. So they went and reviewed security footage from the alley that leads to the stairwell that she was found in. So in the video, they see her walking down the alley with an unknown man until they go out of view. Then they see video of the same man that she was with exiting the same alley by himself without Tess, and then walked north on Church Street until he went out of view. Then by December 10th, police released some grainy CCTV images of the man who was suspected as Tess's murderer. When these images were released, Christina made it a point to share all of these photos on her Facebook every single day. She said that she did recognize this person, but she could not pinpoint exactly where she knew him from. But either way, both Christine and Rachel were confident that someone was going to recognize this man and bring him forward. And exactly that happened. By February 4th, 2018, her murderer was identified as 21-year-old Kaylin Schlatter. Now, going back just a little bit, after releasing the images from the surveillance video at around 9 p.m. that same night on December 10th, Kaylin Schlatter called into the police station admitting that he was the one in the photos. So of course, police brought him in for questioning. He did speak with homicide detectives, but he really didn't say anything and he would not give them a statement. While he was there though, Kaylin's parents brought him some food and a water bottle. But after drinking the water bottle, Kaylin threw the empty bottle into the recycling bin. Police then immediately grabbed the water bottle and compared his DNA to a DNA sample found on Tess's body. The DNA pulled from Tess's body included saliva on her bra and semen on her leg. And after comparing these samples, it came back to being a match. So from that, it was very evident that Kaylin was with her that night and he was probably responsible for her murder. So back to February 4th, just before 11 p.m., Kaylin was found and arrested at his home and charged with second-degree murder. Now, while Kaylin was in the police station sitting in a cell, he was sat between two men who he thought were other inmates, but they were actually undercover cops. At this point, the cops realized that Kaylin absolutely loved to talk. He started a conversation with one of the men asking if he had watched the Super Bowl, since right before he was arrested, he had just watched the Super Bowl with his family at his home. This was the first time that the Philadelphia Eagles had won the Super Bowl in franchise history, so Kaylin called it an epic game. From there, Kaylin spent a lot of time bragging to these undercover cops about his ability to pick up women. He said that he slept with over 40 women, even though he's only 21 years old. He told them about all of these orgies that he's taken part of and said that girls around the town absolutely beg him to sleep with them. So now going back to police, they stated that they did not believe that Kaylin and Tess knew each other prior to the murder and that this seemed like a crime of opportunity. But then by March 21st, the charges against Kaylin Schlatter were upped to first-degree murder. They stated that under Canada's criminal code, a person can be charged with first-degree murder if the murder was planned or deliberate, or if the murder takes place while attempting to sexually assault them or kidnap them. That also falls under first degree. So we will discuss how this all comes into play in just a minute. Now, after being arrested, Kaylin stayed in jail for his bail hearing. By July 24th, the bail hearing started, but then by August 13th, bail was denied. He was in jail for quite some time before his murder trial started on January 13th, 2020. So now let's talk a little bit about Kaylin Schlatter and who he is. Now, at the time of the murder, Kaylin was 21 years old and he was still living with his parents and his younger brother at their home in North Toronto. After he graduated high school, he completed 1 year of postgraduate study as a car mechanic. He also worked with his father in construction. He enjoyed soapstone carving, video games, card games, and board games. However, there was yet another side to Kaylin Schlatter that was uncovered during his pretrial hearing. He apparently had an obsessive interest with violent pornography that featured non-consensual sex and images of choking. There were also witnesses who were previous partners of Kaylin who came forward and said that Kaylin was obsessed with choking of his previous partners, though during these instances it was consensual. However, both of these factors were excluded from trial. We also know how much he loved to brag to these undercover officers about how many women he had slept with. At one point, he also told these undercover officers that he would often go to these gay bars to pick up straight women because he knew that a lot of straight women liked to go to these types of bars. However, during his pretrial, he said that he only bragged to these undercover officers because he was trying to cover up the fact that he was bisexual. He didn't want to be connected to a crime that happened right after he was at a gay bar, so he was doing whatever he could to try and impress the undercover cops. So now let's talk about the actual trial. So during the trial, obviously we find out a lot more about the night that Tess was murdered. So Kaylin arrived to Cruz and Tango's about 15 minutes before Tess and Riley got there. He had already been a little bit intoxicated when he got there because him and a few friends had pre-gamed before going. In surveillance video, Tess, Riley, and Kaylin can all be seen throughout the bar in the upstairs area and the downstairs area and outside of the door. However, throughout the entire time when they all first got there, they did not interact with one another. There was one point where Tess and Kaylin bumped into each other, but the club was crowded and the music was bumping, so they didn't really notice each other. On one surveillance video, we see Kaylin dancing with another man, and to me, it seems like they are kissing each other as well. Once again, Riley and Tess walk by, but they didn't seem to think much of him, but I will point out that Tess does seem to be pretty intoxicated and is stumbling around a bit. So this does contradict a little bit what Riley said about when they left the bar. Riley said that they had left the bar at around 1:30, but then according to the trial, at around 2:15 a.m., security had asked Riley and Tess to leave the club because of how intoxicated they were. So clearly they were very, very intoxicated. They may have been belligerent, so maybe Riley just got the times mixed up, which is very understandable. But apparently, Tess was arguing with the bouncer as he was leading her out the door. As they went outside, they stood on the sidewalk and smoked for a little bit. They continued to stand on the sidewalk as crowds shuffled out of the bar after last call. Soon after this, Kaylin went outside of the bar and briefly interacted with Riley. He asked her for a light for his cigarette, but at that point, him and Riley had again briefly spoken, but he had not spoken to Tess yet. Other than this, Kaylin pretty much just stayed on the outside of the crowd, kind of hanging out by himself and watching everyone around him. Throughout this time, he did have a couple of brief conversations with a few others, but for the most part, he kept to himself and he didn't seem to belong to any actual friend group. During the trial, he pretty much just said that he would very often do this, where he would wait outside of bars and then look for groups of women and then try to spark up a conversation with them to hopefully take someone home. He can be seen throughout various points of the night trying to kiss and talk to and pick up different women, all of which ended up going home with their respective friends instead. At around 2:20 a.m., Tess and Riley walked north on Church Street until they could no longer be seen on camera. Kaylin looked in their direction and then stands where he was for a few minutes, having a conversation with a few other people, but then he starts walking in the same direction that he just saw the two girls head. According to him, he was just heading in that direction so that he could go ahead and grab some food at the Pizza at the corner of Church and Wellesley. And he said that is when he bumped into Tess and Riley. At that point, Riley apparently had recognized him from the bar from their brief interaction, so that is when Riley introduced Kaylin to Tess. Soon after meeting up with the women, Tess tried calling a cab, but Kaylin waved it on. He said that he did this because the cab was actually just holding up traffic, but the prosecution argued that it was actually because Tess wanted to go home, but Kaylin wanted her to stay right there. Then after this, the three of them went on to that hot dog cart that we discussed earlier, and then they went on with their night, eventually meeting up with Michelle and having that whole interaction like we discussed earlier. Then we know that Riley separated from the group, leaving Tess and Kaylin alone around 4 a.m. After this, Tess and Kaylin walked on Church Street, ordered an Uber, but the ride was canceled. Now, I did see on most sources that it wasn't clear who canceled the ride, but what I think they meant by that was that when Christine was getting these messages to her phone, it wasn't clear who canceled the ride from that. But I think it came out in trial that after this ride was requested, the Uber driver did show up to the pickup location at 4:14 a.m., but the driver could not find Tess, so it seems like that is how the ride was canceled. Then, once the two were on the corner of Church and Dundonald Street, Tess sat down on a bench by herself. According to Kaylin, apparently Riley and Tess had had an argument and Tess was upset about it. Now, again, like I said earlier, I don't know exactly how the conversation went where Riley was leaving Tess to go be with her boyfriend and go home, but according to what Kaylin testified, it seemed like they did have an argument about this, but again, we can't be sure. Kaylin seems to have his own story throughout this entire trial. But after this, when Tess was upset, apparently Kaylin wanted to go ahead and make sure she was okay, so he sat down on the bench right next to her. He said that he had also started talking about about a breakup that he had went through recently, and that the conversation was going so great that Tess was listening intently, and she even denied a phone call that she had gotten. However, according to the prosecution, that call never happened. She didn't deny any phone call during this conversation, and they said that this is actually the time that she had requested the Uber to try and go home. But either way, as the two were sitting on the bench, Kaylin claims that she asked him if she could kiss him, so they kissed, and he said that he offered to walk with her to her Uber. But this also cannot necessarily be confirmed since none of it was actually seen on surveillance video clearly. So there was grainy surveillance video that picked up the two, but it was really far away, so when reviewing this footage, it seemed to investigators like the two were just standing there and waiting for the Uber. They did not see anyone kissing or anything like that on the surveillance video as far as they could see, but again, it was super blurry and grainy, so it was really hard to tell. At this point, Kaylin said that Tess had asked him to follow her to the driveway at 582 Church Street and down into the house's stairwell, which of course is where she would later be found. But obviously this doesn't really make any sense because she had just called an Uber. But as we saw in surveillance video earlier, we do see the two walking together towards the house through the alley into the stairwell, so we don't really know what Kaylin said to convince her to willingly walk with him that way, but it's definitely thought that he's the one that convinced her to walk into the alley and not the other way around. So according to Kaylin, the two went into the stairwell and started kissing. He wanted to have sex with her, but she said no because she was on her period. But he stated that the two continued grinding on each other and kissing. After this, he said that he invited her to his parents' house because apparently his parents are just really cool and really nice people, but she declined the invitation. Then, according to the undercover cops that we had discussed earlier, Kaylin told them that he did have sex with Tess in a stairwell, but said that when he left, she was still alive. He said that maybe Tess had taken her own life. He doesn't know. He said that something could have happened that night, but he doesn't remember anything and he doesn't think he's capable of hurting anybody. However, during his time in jail awaiting trial, there was another inmate who took a liking to him at first. They never released who this inmate was, but he had a very lengthy criminal history, including things like breaking and entering and domestic violence. He said that when Kaylin first got there, he felt bad for him because Kaylin was so young and it was his first time in jail. He volunteered to share his cell with Kaylin, so naturally, Kaylin built a trust with this man. According to this inmate, however, he grew tired of Kaylin. He told him what happened to Tess, and he showed absolutely no remorse for what happened to her, yet he would cry himself to sleep because he didn't want to be in jail and because, quote, he missed his mommy. So during the trial, this inmate actually testified that he said he didn't want to snitch on Kaylin because he's been in jail for quite a long time and he knows how it goes when someone rats another inmate out. But he's just so disturbed with what Kaylin did that he felt he had no choice. So, according to this inmate, he said that Kaylin and Tess started making out in this stairwell just as Kaylin said. Of course, Kaylin wanted to keep going further, but she wanted to stop. But he absolutely was not having any of that and he lost control. He apparently tied a scarf around her neck until she passed out and fell on the ground. But this made him even more excited and he was past the point of control, so he came on her. He said after he took this scarf off, Tess was dead. At that point, Kaylin was trying to come up with several different stories to talk his way out of this, saying that maybe Tess was suicidal and that the family tried covering up the suicide and they dumped her body in the alley. Or he really tried saying that she was still alive when he left and that someone must have come in after him and killed her for whatever reason. However, of course, Kaylin and his defense completely denied that these conversations took place and maintained that Kaylin did not kill Tess. They actually brought forward an alternative suspect who they tried to pin the murder on. Again, his name was not released, but he showed up in court and was questioned. He was not able to thoroughly and properly answer all questions though because he did have autism spectrum disorder, disorder, and you know just how brutal these cross-examinations can get. So according to the defense and surveillance videos captured from that night, this suspect was wandering around in the same exact area in the gay village that Tess and Riley was, and he even admitted in his cross-examination that he was wandering around looking for a girl to have a good night with. He was even seen on surveillance video near Kaylin, Riley, and Tess, and he was seen briefly speaking with Tess. However, the suspect testified that it was actually Tess trying to call out to him, trying to get his attention to talk to him, but then Kaylin told her to stop talking to him. But the defense denied this and brought up the fact that the suspect didn't really have any friends and he had a very hard time talking to different women, so he probably was just saying that it was Tess trying to talk to him to make himself feel better. They argued that there was a way for the suspect to have jumped a fence and then killed Tess in that same alley without being seen on surveillance video. But of course, other than him being in the same place at the same time, there was absolutely no actual evidence connecting the suspect to her. And I also want to mention that this man is around 5 feet 3 inches tall, so it would have been quite difficult for him to jump any sort of fences. There was only one person whose DNA was found at the crime scene and on Tess's body, and that was Kaylin Schlatter's. It was completely ridiculous to assume that this man who was 5 feet 3 inches tall could just jump several fences and avoid being seen on any surveillance videos after he killed Tess. That just did not seem reasonable at all. In her closing statements to the jury, his defense lawyer said that Kaylin was a harmless kid and an innocent young man who had just had a consensual sexual encounter. She said, quote, "As hard as it might be to accept, as uncomfortable as it might make us feel, the criminal justice system gets it wrong. Mr. Schlatter was an easy target. He's easy to blame." However, in the prosecutor's closing statements, they counter that with, quote, "Simply put, Kaylin Schlatter sexually assaulted and strangled to death Tess Richey because he wanted sex. He felt that it was his to take regardless of what Tess Richey wanted. Tess Richey was murdered because she said no." At the end of the trial on March 23rd, 2020, Kaylin Schlatter was found guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. The verdict means that jurors believe beyond a reasonable doubt that Kaylin Schlatter sexually assaulted Tess as a part of the same events as her murder. As it stays right now, Kaylin is sitting in prison and hopefully will stay that way for the rest of his life. So now really quick, let's go back in time to when Tess's body was found. So while all of this was going on with Kaylin, so his pre-trial and sitting in jail and all of that, in June of the same year, the two officers who were called out to the scene to find Tess's body and did the laziest job that I have ever seen were charged with misconduct and neglect of duty under Ontario's Police Services Act. The notice stated, quote, "You did not search the adjoining property or immediate area thoroughly, and you did not conduct a canvass of the neighbors. You failed to notify a supervisor officer of all the particulars." However, President of the police union, Mike McCormick, said that he did not agree with these charges, saying that these two officers are very professional and responsible. He said that they did check her last known location, which is in line with their policies and procedures. Apparently, just going there and glancing at the area that she was last known to have been in is what is expected with exceptional officers. So instead of charging these officers, Mike McCormick suggested reviewing the actual policies and procedures. He said that these officers were on a check address call and not involved with an actual missing persons investigation. After the internal review, the two officers remained on duty and faced no punishment as far as I saw. However, after the external review, it was decided that they needed to come up with a new rule regarding missing persons to maintain the public's confidence in their ability to find missing people. They decided to enact a dedicated missing persons unit in March of 2018. So if there's one good thing that came of this, there are more resources now towards finding missing people in this area, but it was at the expense of Tess's own mother having to find her body. Christine said that to this day she still has flashes of finding her daughter's dead body, which is just so horrific, and I can't even begin to understand the things that she's going through. It's just so horrific, and I feel for her. I really do. It's such a horrible thing to have to go through. So that is pretty much where the case ends. I absolutely hate that this happened to such a beautiful, motivated young woman. All she was trying to do was have a good time with a friend who she hadn't seen in quite a while. I am absolutely disgusted with the subhuman trash who had the nerve to make excuses and lie about what he had done. He decided that Tess somehow owed him her body, and when she said no, he just decided that she is his for the taking. It's absolutely disgusting. I am just so very upset that Tess had to lose her life to this disgusting piece of trash, and again, I can't even imagine what it's like. She was just beginning her life. She was going to go on to do so many things. She wanted to see the world. She was so motivated, and she just wanted to live her life. All she was trying to do was hang out with a friend, which is something that so many of us do, and it cost her her entire life, which is just absolutely disgusting. And I know I sit here at the end of every video and sit here and talk about how disgusting all of these cases are, but they just get to me sometimes, and this one really did, because she is my age. I've done the same thing as her. I've gone out with friends and drank and had a good time, and this never happened to me, and I feel like one of the lucky ones. And I'm just so disgusted, and my heart absolutely goes out to her family and everyone who loved her. Tess lost her life for absolutely no reason at all, and it doesn't even begin to make any sort of sense. All we can do is be happy that this disgusting pervert is finally in jail where he belongs. So that is where I'm going to end today's video. As you saw, this video hit me more than normal. Again, she's my age. She does things that I do, and I see a lot of myself in her, and talking about this case was really difficult, and hearing everything that she went through was really difficult, and I'm sorry if you guys felt the same way, but I felt that her case was so important to talk about. Please be safe out there. Please protect yourself. Please protect your friends. Please don't leave them with people that they don't know. If you're drunk, intoxicated, whatever, and you're in public, please make sure you and your friends find a safe way home. Don't stay with someone you don't know. Please don't put yourself in that situation. I know it can be fun and exciting, but from me to you, please don't put yourself into that situation, and do whatever you can to keep yourself and your friends safe. But with that, I'm going to go. I hope you guys liked this video, and if you did, please make sure to go ahead and leave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I put out new true crime and mystery videos every single week. Also, don't forget to turn on those notifications so you get notified of every single new video that I post. Don't forget to follow my Twitter and Instagram. Both will be linked down below, and if you have absolutely any case suggestions, please make sure to go ahead and send them to my email at RachelShannonCases@gmail.com. With that, I hope you guys have a great week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!